Erik stood at the edge of the grave, his hands trembling as the weight of his father's death pressed heavily upon him. The winds whispered through the trees, but it felt like the earth itself was silent, mourning the loss of the great blacksmith Thorn, the man who had shaped the destiny of their bloodline for generations, forging blades and weapons that had given their family its place of power and reverence in the kingdom. But now Thorn was gone, and Erik was left to inherit not just the family forge, but the secrets of a legacy he had never fully understood. The old man had always been secretive about the true nature of their work, hinting at an ancient power, but always masking it with the mundane routine of metal and fire. Now, with his father's death, those secrets seemed to grow louder, and Erik had no choice but to face them. As the last handful of dirt fell on the grave, Erik's gaze was drawn to the small medallion that had been left in his father's hand. It was an old, tarnished piece of silver, shaped like a raven in flight. A symbol he had seen before, etched into the walls of the forge, woven into the tapestries that decorated the halls of their home. But he had never paid it much attention. Now, as the cold wind bit into his skin, he felt a strange pull toward it. He knelt, carefully prying it from his father's fingers. The moment his skin touched the medallion, a shiver ran up his spine, and an image flashed in his mind, an ancient raven perched upon a darkened sky, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Erik's heart raced as the weight of the medallion settled in his palm. It was cold, unnaturally cold. His breath came out in shallow gasps, and the world around him seemed to shift, as if the earth beneath his feet was no longer solid. He stood up, clenching the medallion tightly, feeling an odd connection to it, a pull that could not be explained. The raven, the symbol. It was a part of something much darker than he had ever imagined. And as Erik stood in the twilight of his father's grave, he understood his life would never be the same. The raven had chosen him. In the weeks following his father's death, Erik's life began to unravel in ways he couldn't explain. The first sign came in the form of the raven, which appeared outside his window every morning and every evening, perched high on the branches of a gnarled oak tree. Its eyes, dark and unblinking, never strayed from him. There were moments when Erik could feel the weight of its gaze even when he wasn't looking. It was as though the bird was always watching, always waiting. But the raven wasn't the only thing that changed. His dreams became vivid and disturbing, haunted by strange visions. Each night Erik was transported to a time long before his birth, to a world where shadows were woven into the very fabric of life. He saw flashes of his father, not as the man he had known, strong and stoic, but as a cloaked figure working tirelessly at the forge, hammering not metal, but something darker, something alive. The air crackled with dark magic as the anvil rang with each strike. His father's hands were stained not with soot, but with blood, soul blood, Erik realized in the deepest recesses of his mind. The medallion, the raven, was no simple heirloom. It was a symbol, a mark of something far older, far more dangerous. Each night the raven in his dreams spoke to him in a voice that was both ancient and sorrowful. "The time has come, Erik," it would whisper, its words flowing like ice through his veins. "The legacy calls to you, you must accept it, or be consumed by it." Erik would wake from these dreams, his body drenched in cold sweat, heart pounding as though the raven's wings had beaten in his chest. And when he opened his eyes, the raven would be perched outside his window, watching him with those glowing eyes, as though it was waiting for him to make his choice. Each night the pressure mounted. The raven was no mere animal. It was a harbinger of something far greater and far darker. Erik could feel the legacy pulling him toward an inevitable truth, a truth that was as terrifying as it was seductive. Objective. The raven, now an unyielding presence in Erik's life, signifies the inevitability of his fate. His dreams reveal the terrible secrets his father had hidden, as well as the dark power tied to their lineage. The raven becomes an anchor, pulling Erik toward a path that seems both impossible to ignore and impossible to follow. The night Erik first felt the full weight of his inheritance was a night that would haunt him for the rest of his days. He had just finished a long day at the forge, the air heavy with the smell of burning coal and molten iron. As he walked home, a strange unease settled over him. The streets, usually bustling with the quiet hum of daily life, were eerily silent. Even the raven was nowhere to be seen. A cold wind swept through the village, and the light of the lanterns flickered as though they were struggling to stay alight. Erik's footsteps quickened as the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. Something was watching him. Then the sound came. It was faint at first, a scraping, a low rustling. Erik spun around, his hand instinctively reaching for the knife at his belt, but he saw nothing. The streets were empty, as quiet as they had been moments before, but the feeling of being followed only grew stronger. He quickened his pace, but the shadows seemed to grow deeper, stretching unnaturally as though they had a life of their own. A figure stepped out of the darkness, moving with an unsettling grace. Tall, cloaked, and faceless, it stood at the center of the street, blocking his path. Its presence was suffocating, the air thick with an oppressive, malevolent force. Erik froze, unable to move, unable to speak. The figure seemed to smile, though there was no mouth, just the sense that something cruel and ancient lurked beneath the hood. "You are marked," it hissed, its voice like the scraping of 1,000 bones. "The Raven has chosen you. You cannot escape what is yours." Before Erik could react, the figure lunged, its hand cold and skeletal gripping his throat in an iron hold. His breath was stolen from him, and his vision blurred. The darkness around him closed in, the very air pressing against his chest. As he gasped for breath, he could hear the whispering of the Raven, faint but growing louder. "Fight! Fight!" In that instant the Raven appeared, descending from the night sky with a shriek so piercing it shattered the silence of the village. The shadowy figure recoiled, releasing its grip on Erik, and stepping back. The Raven perched on the figure's shoulder, its eyes glowing with an unholy fire, casting the darkness around them in an eerie glow. "You will not take him!" The Raven's voice rang in Erik's mind, sharp and commanding. "He is mine to guide, not to claim." The shadow screeched in frustration, its form distorting, rippling like smoke, before it vanished into the night, leaving Erik gasping for air, still on his knees in the street. He struggled to rise, his body trembling, his heart pounding in his chest. The Raven perched on the ground beside him, watching him with an almost pitying gaze. "You cannot run from this," it whispered. "The legacy is yours. The path is set." Erik looked up, his mind reeling from what had just transpired. His father's death, the strange medallion, the Raven's guidance. It was all beginning to make sense, but it was a truth he was not ready to face. The shadow, the figure that had attacked him, was a part of something far greater, something that had followed his family for centuries. And now it was after him. As the Raven took flight once more, disappearing into the dark sky, Erik knew one thing for certain. His life, as he knew it, was over. He could never go back to being just a blacksmith's son. The legacy of the Corvo had chosen him, and he would have to face what lay ahead. Objective. The first confrontation with the shadow marks Erik's full immersion into the world of his father's dark legacy. The figure in the shadows represents the dangerous forces at play, forces that Erik must face head-on, whether he is ready or not. The Raven, now both a guide and a protector, shows Erik that his path has been set, and there is no turning back. Days passed, and Erik's mind continued to spiral into confusion. The encounter with the shadow had shaken him to his core. His thoughts returned to his father, Thorn, the man he had known as a hard-working blacksmith, the man who had raised him, teaching him the trade with hands that never showed the darkness that seemed to have followed their bloodline for centuries. But now, Erik understood that his father had hidden more than just the secrets of forging metal. There was something far darker beneath the surface. One night, unable to sleep, Erik ventured into the old study, the room that had always been locked during his father's lifetime. It was there, amid the dust and cobwebs, that he found what he had been searching for, the truth about his family's ancient connection to the dark forces. There, hidden in a secret compartment beneath the floorboards, was a journal, bound in cracked leather. The pages were yellowed with age, and the ink had faded over time, but the words were still legible. As Erik flipped through the pages, he uncovered his father's true legacy, a legacy tied to the forging of the Corvo de Ferro, a sword that was no mere weapon, but a key to the portal between the world of the living and the world of the dead. Thorn had never been just a blacksmith. He had been one of the last of an ancient order, a secret group of artisans who were bound by blood to the task of forging these weapons, imbued with magic, designed to keep the realms of the living and the dead separate. But something had gone wrong. The power within these weapons was far greater than anyone had realized. and over time, the balance had shifted. The sword had begun to feed on the souls of those who wielded it, corrupting them, and in the end, destroying them. Erik's father had kept the sword hidden, but it was clear now. It was not just a weapon, it was a prison for a dark force that sought to break free and invade the living world. As Erik read the final pages of the journal, one sentence stood out. The raven is the key to the end of all things. Only through the raven's power can the Corvo de Ferro be destroyed, or the world will be consumed by darkness. Erik's blood ran cold. The raven, the creature that had haunted his every step, was not merely a guide. It was a part of his inheritance, a part of the curse his father had left behind. Objective. This revelation shows Erik the true scope of his father's involvement in the supernatural. His family's legacy is not just about forging weapons, but about containing a dark power that threatens to consume the world. The raven's role in this legacy becomes clearer. It is both a key and a curse, guiding Erik toward a fate he cannot escape. The weight of the truth was unbearable. Erik paced the room, his hands gripping the journal as if it might slip through his fingers. He could feel the darkness that had plagued his father's life now creeping into his own. The weight of the sword, the Corvo de Ferro, felt like it was resting on his shoulders even though he had never seen it. The knowledge that he had been born into this world of shadows, that his bloodline was bound to this cursed power, made his stomach churn. Erik knew what he had to do. His father had died trying to protect the world from the very thing that Erik was now inheriting. But the price of that protection had been his soul. Thorn had been forced to live a life of torment, bound to the forge and the magic that came with it. Erik could feel that same call now, deep within himself, pulling him toward the Corvo de Ferro, toward the darkness that had consumed his family for generations. He knew that if he didn't act, he would be consumed by it as well. But there was no easy choice. The journal had hinted at a way to destroy the sword, to seal the portal between the worlds once and for all. However, the price was unimaginable. He would have to face the very forces that had haunted his father's life, and that included the raven itself. The creature that had been both a guide and a tormentor. The raven was not a simple animal. It was an ancient being, tied to his bloodline in ways Erik still didn't fully understand. As Erik grappled with the truth, the raven appeared as it always did. It perched on the windowsill, its black eyes glimmering with an eerie light. The air grew colder as it stared at him, almost as if it were waiting for him to make the first move. "You know what you must do," the raven spoke in a voice that echoed in Erik's mind. "You are the heir. You have always been the heir. It is your birthright to control the Corvo de Ferro, to guide the realms between life and death. Reject it and the darkness will consume you." Erik's grip tightened on the journal. The raven's words were both a warning and an invitation, offering him power, but at a terrible cost. The darkness was already inside him, waiting to consume him if he refused. But what if the raven was lying? What if there was another way? The thought of confronting his father's legacy filled him with dread, but he could not turn away. He had already come too far, and the time to decide was rapidly approaching. "I will not be your puppet," Erik whispered, his voice trembling. "I will not let the darkness take me." But deep down, he wasn't sure if he had the strength to resist. He wasn't sure if anyone could. The raven cawed softly, as if amused. "We will see, Erik," it replied, its eyes gleaming with an unfathomable depth. "We will see." With those words, it took off into the night, leaving Erik standing alone, the weight of his father's legacy heavy in his hands. Objective. Erik's inner turmoil deepens as he struggles with the truth of his inheritance. The battle is no longer just against external forces, but against the darkness within himself. His choice is looming, and the raven continues to manipulate and guide him toward a destiny that may already be set in stone. After the chilling revelation of his father's legacy, Erik could no longer stay in the village, not with the dark knowledge weighing so heavily on his soul. The raven's words echoed in his mind day and night. "You are the heir. The darkness is your burden to bear." Erik had tried to push it away, tried to tell himself that he could live a normal life, that he could escape this cursed path, but he could feel the pull of the Corvo de Ferro, that sword of unimaginable power, drawing him closer, as if the very metal of his soul had been forged into its blade. But Erik knew one thing for certain. He would never allow himself to be a puppet of darkness. His father had tried to protect the world by hiding the truth, Thorn had sacrificed himself to keep the sword and its power locked away. But now Erik knew. The time for hiding was over. He had to find the sword. He had to destroy it. But there was a cost. In order to find the Corvo de Ferro, Erik would need to go deeper into the dark heart of his heritage. A heritage that had become a twisted hunt. And this time, he wouldn't be running from it. The first step was to escape the village unnoticed. The night he left, the wind howled as though the world itself was trying to stop him, urging him to stay, to deny his destiny. But Erik was resolute. He packed what little he could carry, a small bag of supplies, his father's journal, and the raven's medallion, and set off into the wilderness, not knowing where his journey would take him, but knowing that there was no turning back. As he traveled, he felt the raven's presence hovering above, watching him. It was as though the bird was guiding him, pulling him towards something greater. But Erik was not alone in this pursuit. As he crossed into the wildlands, he began to sense eyes upon him. Dark, searching eyes. A group of mysterious figures appeared on the horizon, moving with a disturbing precision. Erik recognized them from his father's journal, the Hunters of the Raven. They were his family's ancient enemies, warriors bound by oath to hunt down any heir to the Corvo de Ferro and prevent them from destroying the sword. Erik quickened his pace, the weight of their pursuit already pressing down on him. The darkness was closing in. Objective: the hunt begins. Erik's decision to search for the Corvo de Ferro places him directly in the path of the dangerous Hunters of the Raven, enemies sworn to stop him. He is no longer a mere blacksmith's son, but a hunted man, forced to confront his legacy head-on. Erik had been traveling for days, the chill of the wilderness biting at his bones, his only company the Raven's ever-watchful eyes. The Hunters of the Raven were never far behind, always in pursuit, always just out of sight. They were relentless, like shadows following him at every turn. Erik knew that if he didn't do something soon he would be caught, and his fate would be sealed. It was then that he encountered her, Lilith, a woman cloaked in dark garments, standing at the edge of the forest like a shadow in the night. Her eyes glowed faintly, a soft, unnatural light, and her presence was like a cold wind that sent a shiver down Erik's spine. "I knew you would come," she said, her voice low and mesmerizing. "I've been waiting for you, Erik." Erik stopped dead in his tracks. "Who are you?" "My name is Lilith," she replied. "And I know what you seek. You think you can destroy the sword, but you don't understand the full scope of the power you're dealing with." Erik narrowed his eyes. "How do you know what I seek?" "I know because I am bound to the same curse," she said, stepping closer. "Like you, I carry the mark of the Raven. And like you, I was born to destroy the Corvo de Ferro. But it is not as simple as you think. You cannot destroy what you do not understand." Erik felt a cold wave of unease wash over him. "You want me to stop?" he asked, the skepticism evident in his voice. "No," she replied, her eyes flickering with something ancient and knowing. "I want to help you. The sword is part of a much larger puzzle, Erik. To destroy it, you will need more than just strength. You will need knowledge, and I can give you that." She extended her hand toward him, her fingers long and pale. "I will help you find the key to destroying the sword, but in return, I ask for your trust and your loyalty, for I have my own reasons for wanting the sword destroyed." Erik hesitated. He could feel the weight of her words, dangerous, enticing, but he knew that this was the path he had to take. He had no choice. The Raven's power was too great, the sword too dangerous to ignore. "I don't trust you," Erik said, his voice hard. "But I need your help." Lilith smiled, a flash of something dark in her eyes. "Wise choice, Erik, for if you are to succeed, you will need more than just your courage. You will need allies." With that, she turned, disappearing into the shadows of the forest, leaving Erik no choice but to follow. As they journeyed together, Erik learned more about Lilith, her past, her connection to the Raven, and the sacrifices she had made. She was as much a prisoner of this dark legacy as he was, but her motives were shrouded in mystery. Could she truly be trusted, or was she another piece of the dangerous puzzle he was trying to solve? Objective: Erik forms an uneasy alliance with Lilith, who seems to know much more about the Raven and the Corvo de Ferro than she lets on. Despite his reservations, Erik realizes that he needs her help in his quest to destroy the sword. However, Lilith's true intentions remain unclear, adding a layer of uncertainty and danger to Erik's journey. Erik had no time to waste. With Lilith as his only ally, he pressed onward, the weight of their mission heavy on both their shoulders. The hunters of the Raven were still on their trail, and each night the shadows seemed to stretch longer, their pursuit never relenting. Yet Lilith's presence brought an eerie calm, her knowledge of the ancient forces guiding them through the treacherous landscapes they traversed. For days they journeyed through dark forests and across barren wastelands, the world around them growing ever more desolate. The land seemed to be alive with a silent menace, as if the very earth was aware of their presence. Erik could feel the Raven's watchful eyes, its presence like a constant pulse in his chest, reminding him of his destiny. But there was something else, something that gnawed at his soul. Lilith, with her cryptic words and enigmatic presence, seemed to know far more about the Corvo de Ferro and the power it contained than she had let on. At times she would speak of things Erik couldn't comprehend, hinting at forgotten rituals and forbidden knowledge, but never giving him a clear answer. She spoke of the City of Shadows, a place lost to time, where the first of the weapons were forged and where the key to destroying the Corvo de Ferro was said to lie. Once we reached the city, Lilith told Erik one evening, her voice low and serious, "You will understand everything. You will see the truth of your bloodline and what must be done. But beware, Erik, this place is not for the faint of heart. It holds the secrets of our past, and not all of them are meant to be uncovered." The City of Shadows was a place of myth, spoken of only in whispers. It was said to be a place where the veil between the worlds of the living and the dead was thin, where the boundaries of time and reality blurred. The city had been lost for centuries, its exact location unknown, but Lilith insisted that they were close. The further they traveled, the darker the world seemed to become. As they approached the city's gates, Erik could feel the air grow thick with tension. The sky above was a sickly shade of red, and the winds howled like tortured souls. The Raven, which had followed them silently for days, cawed loudly, as if urging them to move faster. "There is no turning back now," Lilith said, her voice almost a whisper, as they reached the ruins of what was once a grand city. The stones of the city were cracked and weathered, but ancient symbols that Erik had seen in his father's journal, were still etched into the walls. The entire city seemed to hum with a faint dark energy, as if the very foundation of the place was alive, waiting to reveal its secrets. As they stepped deeper into the city, Erik couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The silence of the ruins was oppressive, broken only by the occasional distant clatter of stone shifting, as though unseen forces moved in the shadows. "It's here," Lilith murmured, her eyes scanning the darkened streets. "The key to the Corvo de Ferro lies within these walls." Erik could feel the power of the place. The air was thick with magic, ancient and dangerous. The Raven, which had been circling above, suddenly landed on a nearby stone, its black eyes gleaming. "Remember what I told you," Lilith said, her voice tense. "In the City of Shadows, everything is not as it seems. The truth you seek may cost you more than you're willing to pay." With those words, they ventured further into the heart of the city. The deeper they went, the more Erik felt the pull of the Corvo de Ferro, as if the sword itself was calling to him, urging him towards something hidden in the city's depths. Objective: as Erik and Lilith arrive at the City of Shadows, the atmosphere grows increasingly oppressive. The city, with its ancient power, holds the key to destroying the Corvo de Ferro, but the deeper they venture, the more dangerous the journey becomes. Erik begins to sense that the city may hold more than just the answers he seeks. It may also be the ultimate test of his resolve. As Erik and Lilith ventured deeper into the City of Shadows, the air thickened with an unnatural stillness. The walls of the city seemed to close in around them, as though the very stones themselves were watching. Every step Erik took felt heavier, as though the city was testing his resolve. The Raven, always present, circled above them, its caw echoing off the broken towers, a constant reminder that Erik was not just walking through a desolate ruin, but into the heart of his legacy. "We are close," Lilith whispered, her eyes scanning the ancient symbols carved into the city's walls. "The sword is hidden here. The key to ending all of this is within reach." But Erik felt a deep unease in the pit of his stomach. The Raven, now perched on a high stone pillar, was silent. It watched them intently, its eyes glowing faintly. There was something else in the city now, a presence that had been awakened by their arrival. The deeper they went, the stronger the feeling of being hunted became. At last they reached the central chamber of the city, a vast open space the size of a cathedral, with a high arched ceiling covered in intricate carvings. In the center of the room lay a pedestal, and on that pedestal, encased in a glass-like sphere, was the Corvo de Ferro. The sight of the sword sent a chill through Erik's bones. It was beautiful, and yet something about it was wrong. The blade seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy, as if it were alive, as if it was calling to him. Erik stepped forward, but Lilith held out her hand, stopping him. "Not yet," she said, her voice low, almost reverent. "Before you take it, you must understand what you are dealing with." Erik turned to her, his heart pounding. "What is it? What's the price of taking it?" Lilith's eyes darkened. "The sword is a prison. It holds a force older than time itself, a power that can destroy worlds. The Corvo de Ferro was never meant to be wielded. It was forged to seal away that power. But if you take it, you will either control it, or be consumed by it." Erik stood there, torn between the need to end this curse once and for all, and the fear of the sword's immense power. He felt the pull of it, calling to him like a siren song. Suddenly, the raven let out a sharp caw, and in an instant, the chamber was filled with shadows. The walls seemed to ripple, and the ground beneath them trembled. From the darkness emerged a figure, the Lord Corvo, the one who had created the Corvo de Ferro, the one who had bound his soul to the blade. "Foolish child," the Lord of Ravens boomed, his voice resonating like thunder. "You think you can destroy what you were born to wield? You are nothing but a puppet, and the sword is your master." With a wave of his hand, the shadows surged toward Erik, the air thick with the weight of ancient power. Erik drew his own sword, but it was nothing compared to the Corvo de Ferro. He knew he was no match for the Lord of Ravens, but he had come too far to turn back now. Lilith stepped forward, her hands raised in an ancient gesture. "We must act quickly, Erik. Destroy the blade, or control it. It's the only way." The battle between Erik, Lilith, and the Lord of Ravens raged through the chamber, each strike echoing with the weight of destiny. But Erik knew the true battle was not against the Lord. It was against the sword, against the darkness that threatened to consume him. As the fight reached its peak, Erik made his choice. He rushed toward the pedestal, his hand outstretched, and seized the Corvo de Ferro. The moment his fingers touched the blade, a searing pain shot through him, as if the sword was burning his soul. His vision blurred, and he could feel the darkness wrapping around his mind, pulling him into the abyss. But in that moment, he heard the raven's voice in his mind, louder than ever before. "You are the heir. You are the one who must make the choice. Control it, or it will control you." With a final surge of willpower, Erik gripped the sword tighter, focusing every ounce of strength on resisting its power. The shadows swirled around him, but he pushed back, forcing the Corvo de Ferro to bend to his will. Slowly, the blade's energy subsided, and the darkness began to recede. The Lord of Ravens let out a howl of frustration, his form dissolving into the shadows as the Corvo de Ferro was finally subdued. Objective: Erik's final confrontation with the Lord of Ravens is a test of his willpower and strength. By taking control of the Corvo de Ferro, he proves that he is not just a puppet of his heritage, but someone who can master the darkness. The battle is won, but Erik knows that the sword's power is far from gone, and he must now live with the consequences of his choice. The City of Shadows began to collapse as the Corvo de Ferro's power was finally contained. The walls of the chamber cracked, the stone crumbling into dust. Erik, still gripping the sword, stood at the center of the chaos, his body trembling from the strain of controlling the dark energy that had nearly consumed him. Lilith stood beside him, watching in silence. The Lord of Ravens had been defeated, but the victory came at a price. Erik could feel the sword's power still pulsing through him, an eternal reminder of the choice he had made. He had not destroyed the blade. He had become its master, bound to it for the rest of his life. "We did it," Lilith said, her voice soft but laced with sorrow. "But you know, Erik, this victory comes at a cost. You are now the guardian of the Corvo de Ferro. The legacy is yours to bear, for better or worse." Erik nodded, his gaze fixed on the sword in his hands. He had won, but the fight was far from over. He could feel the weight of his destiny pressing down on him, the burden of the power he now controlled. The raven, silent for the first time in ages, flew down and landed on Erik's shoulder, its eyes glowing with an ancient wisdom. The cycle is complete, the raven spoke, its voice resonating with a quiet finality. You are the heir, the darkness is yours to wield. Erik took a deep breath, the weight of the sword both a burden and a blessing. He knew his journey was far from over, but for the first time he felt ready to face whatever came next. The Corvo de Ferro had been controlled, and with it, Erik's legacy had begun. But as he looked out into the crumbling city, he knew that the true challenge had only just begun. Objective: the final part of Erik's journey is not just about defeating the Lord of Ravens, but about accepting the consequences of wielding the Corvo de Ferro. He is now the sword's master, bound to its power and its curse. The story closes with the sense that Erik's journey has come full circle, but the path ahead is still uncertain, leaving room for future challenges.